Hi there, everybody. My name is Leah McQueen, and I'm just talking about a concept called approval voting. I learned about this concept at the Green Party National Convention. They had information booths there, and I picked up information from that booth that sounded pretty intriguing. I've spoken about Election USA and Trust Vote and the effort to implement voting reforms after examining a lot of issues that occurred during the Democratic primary season. And instant runoff voting is one type of reform. Paper ballots are another type of reform. And there are many other reforms that have been suggested, and these can be implemented at the state level. This approval voting is a new type of voting that I thought was pretty interesting. The wonderful thing is that our current ballots can be used for approval voting. It doesn't have to be a whole big paradigm change at the Secretary of State's office. Our current balloting system can be used for approval voting. Just some slight changes made in how the votes are counted, or well, cast and counted. So I'm gonna try to give an explanation, but sometimes seeing, it's good to be shown rather than have it explained with a lot of words. So I'm gonna show a flyer, and hopefully that'll explain how it's done. Currently, we vote for one candidate, and then the candidate that gets the most votes wins. With approval voting, you can vote for more than one candidate. You can vote for uh, the candidates that you approve of. Say there are five candidates, three you consider unacceptable based on your political outlook. Well, you can vote for two out of five candidates and just leave the three that you don't support at all, leave their spaces blank. So if there's like one candidate that's your ideal, let's say her name is Jill Stein, and you say, I'll vote for Jill Stein. And then say, for instance, there's a candidate that you don't like as much, but you can tolerate them. For me, it would be Donald Trump. So I can vote for Jill Stein and Donald Trump. And then there's two candidates that you just do not accept at all based on their record, based on their policies, based on their issues, and you just leave those blank. And so your top two, well, the ones I would leave blank, Hillary Clinton and Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson, it's not personal. It's just, the deregulation and totally free trade and free, business decides all the rules. I can't tolerate that because there's no protection for the vulnerable and the weak in our society, and so that's why. Otherwise, on Gary Johnson, there's quite a bit of his platform I do support. And so, but I would have to leave his space blank because I disagree with his issues very strongly in some aspects. Hillary Clinton, her warmongering, her lack of empathy for others, I cannot accept. And so I would leave her space blank. But Jill Stein, I would approve of. And Donald Trump, I would somewhat approve of, but hopefully he won't win. And then since we can vote for more than one, that takes the pressure off of only choosing one candidate. But I'm just going to show what this card looks like, and if you can see it, currently this is our system right here. You can only vote for one, and you vote for the realistic choice, the one that you think that can win, and you leave your ideal choice blank, and then the decent and terrible. So you get a realistic candidate or a candidate you consider realistic. With approval voting, you can actually vote for more than one. You can vote for 3 out of 4. You can vote for 2 out of 4. So you can vote for your ideal candidate and your realistic candidate and a candidate that you consider at least decent, if nothing else. And you just leave the terrible candidate blank. And so everyone casts their votes this way. It's almost like ranked choice. It's not quite instant runoff. It's approval voting. So the candidate who gets the most votes of approval wins. And then the others are based, kind of ranked based on getting maybe less check marks. So actually, it's the candidate who is the very best for the most people wins the election. There's no vote splitting or anything. And so I hope I've explained that pretty clearly. I like it. It's a new way of thinking, and the best of all, our current ballots will support this system. The only difference is how those ballots, the votes done, like you can vote for more than one, that has to be explained, and then how those votes are counted and tabulated. It's the candidate who gets the most checks or has the most circles filled in. So, and the one that doesn't get any or hardly any, they lose. And so the worst candidate loses the election, which is how it's supposed to be, rather than the worst candidate wins by default because the ideal and realistic candidate split the vote. There's a question on these one of these flyers. It says, who benefits from approval voting? The major party supporters, they get better primaries with no vote splitting. And then minor party supporters, they are viewed as allies, and they show their issues get more attention from the front runners. And then for the general public, there's more civility and consensus among the public, and the parties will compete to serve the voters rather than themselves. And so I'll show one more picture, and for the most famous vote splitting of all time, the 2000 election, which still somehow haunts people. But as I explained in a different video, Al Gore actually lost considerable support to George Bush. Members of the Democratic Party voted for George Bush directly rather than Al Gore. Even in his home state of Tennessee, a majority of voters supported Bush rather than their own, candidate from their own party. But anyway, I'm going to show this. And if you can see, let's get that glare off. This is what a ballot from 2000 would look like if we had approval voting. Al Gore would be a realistic choice, tolerable to progressives and liberals and centrist Democrats. And then Ralph Nader would be the ideal choice for progressives and liberals and maybe whoever else, since he also pulled independent and Republican voters. So Ralph Nader would be the ideal choice of many. So in this type of election format, there would have been no vote splitting. There would just been more checks for either Ralph Nader or Al Gore, and either Al Gore or Ralph Nader would have won the 2000 election. Pat Buchanan would not have taken votes from anyone, though he did in Florida, where people accidentally voted for him. And then George Bush and Harry Browne, the Libertarian, might have seen less voting since fewer people supported their positions. But this is how it would have turned out. Either Al Gore or Ralph Nader would have been guaranteed to ascend to high office. They would have won. The progressive issues would have won. America probably would have been a better place, maybe. We hope, but we'll never know. We can only look forward. We can only go forward. The past is the past. It happened. There's nothing you can do about it. We can only learn. But the interesting thing is, these types of voting formats are known. They're known. And it's just a fact that for whatever reason, they have not been implemented. We have the 2000 election was 16 years ago. We know about vote splitting. We know about third party candidates. No one's really done much about it. We do have state by state voting reforms. I think Maine and maybe Vermont. Some of the smaller states have already implemented a type of runoff voting. and then some cities and municipalities. So it's at the lower grassroots level it's happening, but there hasn't been a real push by either of the major parties to get this type of reform. Jill Stein has talked about how she tried to get either instant runoff voting or some type of new kind of voting for Massachusetts, and it was defeated by the Democratic Party in Massachusetts. It's the major parties that are knocking this back. They want the two-party system. They do not want alternative choices. And so, but we're seeing just a wave, coming from the bottom up. It's not top down, it's from the bottom up voting reform. And in California, they are implementing several types of voting reform. The voting system, it's catching on. People have looked around and said this is completely unacceptable. What the United States has become an embarrassment to democracy and an embarrassment to every other nation in the world, whether first world or third world. Our voting system is an embarrassment and something that we should not be proud of, but we can still work on. The paper ballots, honesty and totaling the vote count, these are implemented at the state level. So it's a matter of going to your state legislature and just saying, or your election officials, the Secretary of State's office, getting a wave of support to come there with you and saying, this is unacceptable, what we've seen. This primary season, it cannot take place during the general election. We are better than that. Our state is better than that. And so even this approval voting, that can be done at the state level. Instant runoff voting, state level. States have to make this change within their states. It's not the federal level. It's not it doesn't go through US Congress and they have to cast their votes. It's the state level. And right now the California Assembly's deciding these issues with their own voting system. They're deciding whether they will allow felons who are sitting in jail to vote. Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, the governor, is doing something similar. He wants to be able to issue voting rights to felons who are even sitting in prisons. He's getting pushback and blowback from Republicans, but he's trying. So it is state level. Your governor, your state, legislature, your assemblies, your state representatives, these are the people that you need to lobby for all of these voting reforms, including the paper ballot system, which is not digital, which is not proprietary software that no one can see, which is not, old machines that are hackable and have been proven to be hackable through successful attempts. They do not pass inspection at all. And so these are things that you and me, ordinary citizens, can do. We've got a lull in the election schedule, although some states are still doing their down ballot voting. So we're still getting through some states' primary seasons for down ballot voting. But even as you're campaigning for the general election, which is in 3 months from now, it's August 8th. I believe the November election is Tuesday, November 8th. If my calculation is correct, that's 3 months where you can actually work on these issues. And I hope you are successful, your state that you live in. I hope your state is successful for the rest of our sakes. I really do. We all have to play a part. There's 50 states, and hopefully more will endeavor to follow California's example, Virginia's example, Maine, Vermont, and other states that have made some changes, easy changes. Good luck.